Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Daily December 2019. This is day 18, I think. No, day 19. 19. It's been a long day already. So, um, as you all are aware, um, I am behind on the Daily December, so I need to catch up. I've got a couple video ideas, but I had so much fun yesterday just walking through my old character sheet that I want to do more of that. I'm sorry if you're not a fan of fourth edition, but this was my first tabletop D&D game, uh, and I love it. I think it's just so cool and interesting. And so one of the things the offline character builder comes with is some pre-made character sheets to kind of give you an idea of how you might build a character and to show you what characters look like. Um, and four of these characters are the actual fourth edition character sheets of Acquisitions Incorporated. Now, I did a video about Aki Inc. A little while ago. I love Acquisitions Incorporated. It has inspired my DMing style. Chris Perkins is amazing. It's the reason Critical Role and Encounter Role Play and everybody else exists. They were the first group to live stream their games. So and they're still going strong. But when they started, it was actually a podcast, and it was done to advertise fourth edition, which was brand new. They played two podcast games. Each game is considered a season at this point because they only did it like once a year. So the first podcast game, they just had Binwin, Bronzebottom, Omen Drawn, and Jim Dark Magic, played by Scott Kurtz, Jerry Holkins, and Mike Krahulik, respectively. The second podcast, they added Will Wheaton's character, Aophel El Romane. And then the third, they on the first one they did keep on the Borderlands. They had actual adventure. Second, they did. They had to go to this place and take out some rival dwarves. The third one, spoiler alert for a 10-year-old game. Aophel's Aophel dissolved in a pit of acid, and his character died. So the third game, which was the first to actually be broadcast, was them going to hell to get Aophel back. And then the fourth one was them going to Jim, the Dark Magic's home in New Hampshire, to hear the reading of the will of his late grandfather. And that fourth one is one of my favorites. It was the last fourth edition game. Right after that, they switched over to D&D Next, and then continued into fifth edition. And it was the second to last one that had Aophel in it. These characters are all level 3. So I think these are the character sheets from the first live game, because I think they gained a level every adventure. Um, and but Binwin's character sheet, which I'm going to show you in a second, is actually built incorrectly, because again, they didn't understand the system very well either. Mike Krahulik had never played D&D before Acquisitions Incorporated. So anyway, let's get to the character sheet. So this is Binwin Bronzebottom. This is Scott Kurt's character. He has a picture I'll show you. That is Binwin. He was the party's meat shield, and because the party didn't have a rogue or anything like that, he was also the guy that took care of traps for them, generally by running headfirst into them. His the stuff, like the personality traits and stuff, is hilarious to read on this, but unfortunately, it cuts off the end of it. So I'll have to show you guys it in the actual character builders sometime, some other time. But let's look at the sheet itself. So he's a fighter. When they first built their characters, only the PHB 1 for 4th edition was out, and they each picked a very iconic character class. Scott went with fighter, Jerry went with cleric, Jim went with wizard. And this just goes to show you just kind of how customizable 4th edition was, because despite the fact that Binwin is playing a just classic fighter, he gets to do some cool stuff. And one of the things you'll notice, first of all, is his strength is not his highest score. It's actually Constitution. This specific character build actually relies on Constitution for a lot of his abilities. So having a higher Constitution score, first of all, means you can see he has a lot of healing surges he gets to use. So he can just keep getting hit and healed over and over again, which is what a fighter does. And it also means he has decently high hit points for a third level fighter. Does mean he sacrifices a little of his power, but as you can see, he uses a hammer in this one. This is before Binwin switched over to using hand axes, because by the time he did 5th edition stuff, he D&D Next, he used a great axe, and then he switched over to using a pair of hand axes. So on this, he's actually using a crag hammer, just a big two-handed hammer, and he has a bunch of weapons. He just like collected them. So he had a long sword. He had hand axes. Like, he was just a walking weapons thing. So racial stuff. Dwarves were proficient with hammers. I have no idea why I cut everything off here for this. Normally it wraps it. But for the most part, the racial stuff don't change too much. We mentioned before that the defenders, and this fighter is a defender, have this mark ability, and everyone does it a little differently. His mark ability was called Combat Challenge, where when he attacked, he would mark foes just by attacking them. And you got the regular -2 to attacks, not including you. But he also got to make extra attacks if they attacked someone that wasn't him when they were in melee range. He got a basic attack. And in 4th edition, and they had a similar feature in 3rd edition, On fourth edition, it was called shifting. Third edition, it was called a 5-foot step. If you were within melee of someone and you wanted to get out of melee, to be able to cast a spell or something without getting an opportunity attack, you could do what was called shifting, where you would use all of your movement, but instead of with him, he had 5 squares of movement. You would only move 1 square, but it wouldn't provoke opportunity attacks or anything like that for shifting. With his combat challenge, if someone tried to shift away from him that he had marked, he still got the opportunity attack. So you can see this version of fighter is a very aggressive style for fighter, which Scott played beautifully. Combat superiority, he could add his wisdom mod to opportunity attacks and hits and foes movement. So that's something in 5th edition that's basically the sentinel part of these sentinel feat was something that was just built into this version of the fighter. And then fighters actually had special talents that they could get. Like in previous editions, they just got extra feats. Fighters got these special talents, which were basically feats for fighters, in addition to their regular feats. And Battle Rager Vigor, but basically anytime he hit with a melee attack, he got temporary hit points. And whenever he had temporary hit points, he would do extra damage. So again, this whole character build was meant to dive into a group of enemies, start beating on them, and get as much damage and health as possible, going over and over and over again. You do Dwarven weapon training, which just gave him more damage, and then Dwarf's Stoneblood, which is add half his con modifier, which again we talked about already. Constitution can actually be used offensively in 4th edition to Battle Rager Vigor temporary hit points. So now he gets even more temporary hit points just for hitting people. And yeah, I mean, as you can see, my character is level 7. These guys are level 3. So their bonuses aren't nearly as high, but you can see he was trained in endurance, intimidate, and heal, it looks like. And that was really it. So we can go here. We'll talk about the rest of this stuff as we go. Here again are the cool action cards. And again, you can see Second Wind has a special thing. Even at level 3, Second Wind already has a special thing specifically for the fighter, which is you gain a +2 bonus to all defenses until the start of your next turn. So if he heals himself using his Second Wind, he becomes harder to hit. Combat Challenge, that's his marking card. Crushing Surge is just a standard attack. This was just your basic, I hit things with a hammer. And it had this thing invigorating. Invigorating, if we look back up here, 10 pimper hit points when you hit with melee or close, double with invigorating. So any attack that had the invigorating keyword, he got extra hit points if he used that attack. And if he missed with the attack, he would still get the temp hit points. So again, the character is just built to go in and just swing away. The other thing here is just your standard Again, I hit something with a hammer, and this specifically, um, if you wield an axe, hammer, or mace, it does extra damage equal to your con modifier, but you grant combat advantage to the target until the start of your next turn, which in 4th edition, combat advantage was just a +2 bonus to attack rolls. So not quite like advantage in 5th edition, but still a big deal. So he could do more damage if he wanted with this, is 1d10 plus 10, or he could do less damage, 1d10 plus 6, but get extra temp hit points and stuff. And so it was a very cool idea of a good class where you kind of gauge, do I want more hit points? Do I want to do more damage? What are we doing? Dwarven Resilience was a racial power, which basically gave him a second use of his second wind. So most characters could only use second wind once per encounter. Because he's a dwarf, he could do it twice per encounter, which again gave him a bonus to all the defenses as well. So, and the second wind was a minor action, so you could heal and still attack, and this is the same turn. This is where the things kind of get broken for him, because he has shield bash as his counter, but he doesn't have a shield to use it, and they didn't realize that he wasn't using a shield with this character, so he actually couldn't use this attack. And actually, I believe it comes up in the game where it goes, hey, I can't use this, I'll have to do something else. But yeah, just like me, didn't know what he was doing when he built it. They rebuilt the character over and over again and made him super cool. And then Crushing Blow, we see the 2 weapon. He gets extra damage for wielding a hammer. So this is 2d10 plus 10. This is just a straight up, I'm going to hit you really hard for his encounter. And then it did daily. This did even more damage. Plus the target was marked. And no mark, it couldn't be marked by someone else, which would to take away your mark. So this is like a super mark plus a lot of damage. And again, you always have this additional effects, extra damage if you have temp hit points. So, Boundless Endurance was a fighter utility power, which was basically what was called a stance. In 4th edition, stances were basically just things that lasted till the end of combat. And this one gave you regeneration, which meant every turn at the start of your turn, you would regain hit points as long as you were bloodied. So again, that idea of bloodied actually changed how abilities worked in 4th edition. And then we have his magic items, which for the most part he didn't really use a lot. The chainmail of resistance was just armor, and I think it might have been because you choose a damage type to be resistant to. And 4th edition, resistance was just a flat number you would take off the damage. So resist 5 meant if someone hit you with 10 points of fire damage, you would subtract 5 from that. So if someone used like Scorching Ray and hit you with 3 rays of fire, and each one, let's say, did 13 damage, well, you would subtract 5 damage from each one of those rays, meaning each one only did 8 damage. So it was, again, a little bit more confusing. I actually like the resistance in 5th edition better because it's always just half. You don't have to do as much math. Battle Standard of Might, basically, he just got to pop this battle standard down, and everyone within, I think it was, 5 squares of it just did extra damage. Cloak of the Walking Wounded. It's basically if you use your second wind while bloodied, you can use 2 healing surges instead of 1. So extra health, which again, healing surge is a quarter of your hit points. So with this, if he was bloodied, meaning at under half hit points, he could use 2 healing surge, basically get half of his hit points as a minor action. And then this one here was a daily power, and it just meant that he would do extra damage when he charged, and the Craghammer itself did extra damage when he charged. Which charging was basically there's a feat in 5th edition called the Charger feat, which if you take the dash action, you can make an attack or shove someone at the end of your dash. That was charging in 4th edition, and anyone could do it. Binwin was just built to be really good at charging. So the character would literally run into combat, do extra damage when he did, get temporary hit points. He was a really cool, fun character for people to play. I absolutely adore all this stuff. And again, you could play the entire game with just these 2 sheets of cards. It was super simple, super fun. And then there's Binwin. Since it's only 20 minutes, I think that's where we're going to go ahead and end this one. The next video will be another Acquisitions Incorporated character sheet, because again, I really love this stuff. I missed 4th edition. I had a blast playing it, and I'd like to play it again sometime if I can ever find someone that would want to run it. But anyway, that's all for me today. I'll see you guys in the next time. All right, bye bye.